I'm Deirdre Straughan with the Open Solaris Community Group at Sun Microsystems, and I'm here with Ben Rockwood, the god of sysadmins, who has joined us here at LISA 09 in Baltimore. So why did you want to come to LISA?
Because it's the premier conference of the year for system administrators and has been for a long time. So I am a sysadmin and I've never come to do my Mecca pilgrimage, and so I finally got to come this year.
So this was your first time? This
was my first time, and it was of course you always pick the best year to come, right? So down economy and the conference attendance is down by half, and but it's also been good, right? Because actually it's interesting. It's you only get like the most hardcore core people now who come, in the down economy. So it's been a good conference nevertheless. You get to see a lot of the personalities you hear about, but don't necessarily normally see.
Okay. So you came here to meet the people, and what else did you want to get out of this?
To meet the people, the security summit was one of the big reasons I wanted to come, just because there's a lot of fantastic security technology inside of Solaris, and sometimes it's difficult to use, and so that was really good to get some of those ideas of how that's being used. There's a number of cloud talks here, and I'm in the cloud industry, so as an insider looking at what other people who are pretending to be insiders think about it is kind of fascinating, right? I mean, I was actually confused in most of them. This is how they do it. No, they don't. No, they don't.
Is there some other they?
Yeah. So, well, this, kind of the cycle of the evolution of an industry, right? You get the initial people who really do the innovation and design the solutions, and of course it's a very iterative approach. And then once it's started to really kind of become a buzz like cloud has, you have all these kind of second tier people who try to cash in on it, right? So they come and do talks about principles and things like that, and you're like, I was there, this is not what they were thinking. It was not that thought out. It really just sort of evolved. But I'm glad you've come up with your own version of history.
Now, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it sounds a lot like social media, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like any industry, right? If you're lucky enough to be involved early on in things, and then social media is a great example, right? I mean, people got out there and started blogging, started recording things like this. And it just seemed like a good idea and kind of an evolutionary thing to do. And there was no great pontification, that this was the next wave of social media or something like that. It just seemed like a good idea to do and a great way to connect with people. And all of a sudden you have these like experts who are now, you can buy courses from them, and they'll come to your company and tell you how to drive social media, right? It's like,
yep.
You see those conferences, right? And it's like, you have a WordPress blog, and somehow if Robert Scoble comes and comments on my blog, I've now made it.
The record, Scoble has never commented on my blog.
Yeah,
or yours either, has he?
Well, yeah. Well, I'd be a little nervous if Scoble was reading my blog, but he did interview. He's interviewed a couple of people from Sun. He did an interview with Jonathan Schwartz a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
And that was interesting and painful to watch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's leave Scoble out of the conversation.
Okay. Cult of personality remains nameless.
So the security summit, you came for that. What was the highlight of that for you?
The highlight. I don't necessarily think there was a highlight. I think that some things are fundamentally flawed if there is one. There was a good range of information throughout the day. Started off very kind of academic, right? So it was fun to have kind of an old school academic guy out to kind of school us on some of the basics.
Bill Cheswick of AT&T.
Yeah, which was funny. He had great advice, but he still thought that someone was going to be bought by IBM. So it was like, we clearly...
He's been in his ivory tower.
Exactly. It's like that's good. You've been so busy with research you haven't even caught up on the news. But so it was interesting to get his perspective, that he's been around so long and has so much influence. So that was good, and then moving in throughout a number of things that have been in Solaris for a while and how we can better utilize them, like Kerberos in the web, and hearing from Darren Moffat is always really fun, And that's one of the funnest thing about Sun summits and events like this, is the fact that you're hearing it from the guys who wrote it, right? There's no abstraction. It's not the product manager who's up there telling you about the technology. It's the guy who actually did it. Yeah. So it was really fun, and then connecting afterwards is just priceless. Being able to actually ask questions about security features in Solaris to Darren Moffat, and talk to some of the other guys involved. So it's been a really fun event, and I think a lot of people really walked away with a great appreciation, and seeing some of the questions that were even being asked by other people gives you an idea of what other people's concerns are. I think one of the most interesting is that there's been a big renewed interest in auditing, which is hilarious because it's been one of Solaris Core's competencies for an eternity, right? 10 years plus, I think. It's had a fantastic auditing framework, and all of a sudden now it's like really exciting to people, and they're almost like I think due to the kinds of deployments they're doing and a lot of the compliance issues, both for PCI and Sarbanes-Oxley and ISO standards and stuff, people are almost rediscovering, old gems, which is really kind of fun, especially, having been around the Solaris world for a while. Sometimes you see these kind of ebbs and flows, and it's kind of fun when people rediscover something that's just been there forever.
It might be good also for the people on the Sun side to be reminded that, oh yeah, we have these things, and we don't think about it because it's not the latest and greatest, but it has new value.
Yeah.
So it's valuable for us to come and get that feedback.
Old tools solve new problems. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Moving on to Solaris and Open Solaris. What was this question? What is your favorite Open Solaris feature?
My favorite Open Solaris feature?
Or Solaris, or both.
Well, yeah. To me, it's really one and the same. It's just where you are in the development pipeline, and that is actually probably one of my favorite features right there. It's just the fact that it is a single code base, Spark x86, and the work that's being done in Open Solaris is available very quickly to people to use right away if they so choose or so daring, and then trickles down into an enterprise release product. So being part of actually the full development cycle and being able to choose as a customer where and when I want to deploy based on my tolerance to risk is really powerful. Dtrace is amazing in ZFS, but right now I've really been excited about Crossbow. Crossbow is really a fundamental technology, especially in cloud, with all the virtualization technologies, and seeing that Sun's virtualization strategy has really come together around Crossbow. We have XVM Zen, which has really hit a really nice place recently with a lot of the effort that went into it. We have a really nice tool chain that wraps around it. We have VirtualBox, which is being used not just for home user personal use, to run Excel or something in Windows, but is now a component of like the VDI solution for the virtual desktop infrastructure solution. Like when you want to spin up Windows for Sunray client, you actually have VirtualBox on the back end. So now it's an enterprise tool. And Solaris containers, which I think still are probably the premier enterprise virtualization technology. We have all these fantastic technologies, and then when you bring ZFS underneath the virtualized disk, and you bring Crossbow now to virtualize networking, it means that you have this beautiful, full stack, unified solution. Something like network virtualization in Crossbow isn't necessarily new, but the thing is that it was re-implemented in a different way based on the virtualization technology. So some of the things, not all, but some of the things that Crossbow does fundamentally are done inside VMware's ESX product. They're done in, even some of the workstation products, and every virtualization product has to solve network virtualization, but it's always a component of the solution, and it's not generic at all. In Solaris, it's a beautiful generic framework And so I don't have to rely on all these different technologies and the different ways they handle it. It can all be done beautifully in the OS. And so it's just really just kind of beautiful flowing architecture. And it all is just really coming together. It's all really congealed really nicely. So that makes me really happy. And especially because I am in cloud, and we fit into the infrastructure as a service, and our entire platform is built on open Solaris essentially, is that as a cloud provider, this gives me a huge number of options. So when I can pull all these various solutions that I have in the operating system that are all integrated in a really nice generic sort of way, I can reuse components, build automation technology around it, reuse all those components based on different virtualization technologies. Plus I have all the awesome security features and auditing and some of the more boring but necessary stuff that's been there for a long time, is tried and true and tested. So it's just a beautiful little platform, right? As opposed to Linux, where Linux has a lot of great options too, but a lot of it's kind of bolted in and on.
Okay.
Was that a complete answer?
Yes, that was very good. Thank you.
That's actually something. That was good.
Yeah.
And this is something that marketing doesn't point out enough.
Well,
That's
we're
why
marketing
capturing
now,
this
so
content.
hey.
Yeah, I know. Well, the funny thing is I know it. I'll sound like a sellout, because it's like, wow, somebody told you to say that. It's like, no, but I'm telling everyone else to say it. And then
Yeah, we couldn't have said it that well. So.
Well, that is kind of one of the fun things about it, though, is because it's moving so fast that it's really hard for traditional, marketing practices and whatnot to keep up, because the technology is moving so fast, and especially at a high level, how do all these various components fit together?
Yeah, the comprehensive view sometimes is really hard to see when you're looking at specific features.
Yeah.
So what's in? Is there anything else that you've enjoyed with Solaris Open Solaris recently?
Oh man.
What was the question? I didn't hear.
Just asking.
One of the other things, of course, would just be access to the source. I know it's not some whiz-bang feature, but access to the source is so fantastic. I've been administrating Solaris for almost 15 some years. Back in the SunWest days, and having access to the source code is just phenomenally powerful, because you get close to it in a lot of cases. Like in forensics, I do a lot of forensics. When you have hundreds of boxes, thousands of boxes, eventually they crash, and you need to find out why. And you start seeing things in there, but you can't really explain them because you don't have access to the source. So I think probably of all of Sun's sites and resources, the one that I use the most is OpenGrok to go through the code. I spend a lot of time in Solaris source, and I'm not a kernel developer. I am not going to write a module for the Solaris kernel anytime soon. I wish I could, but it's just priceless in terms of being able to really get in there, dig around. And I mean, the presentations that I've done here and other places on ZFS internals are all just based on me trying to solve problems and getting into the code and getting dirty and using dtrace to refine that. It's just that's really exciting and really powerful. And you don't always understand everything, but you have the option, and it's always nice to have that resource that kind of prods you to dig deeper and ask questions. And that's what keeps it fun and interesting.
So, community, which is what we do. What do you think is working well in the Open
I think that
Solaris community?
Open Solaris social media is working really well.
Thank you.
'Cause
it's okay, I still have a job.
don't ever fire her, or the wrath of hell shall come down on you.
The wrath of Rockwood.
The wrath of Rockwood will come down on you. Yeah. No, we've been doing quite a lot think we've been breaking ground, really. There's always a need for content, right? And presentations like this, I mean, this is my first year to Lisa. I can't afford to come to these things. I wish I could, but I can't. Air travel is expensive, time off work is expensive, getting people in your organization to understand why you want to go to one conference or another is difficult, especially some of the really good ones like, FOSS in India, some of the conferences that go on in Europe. I mean, if people like you didn't go and record this stuff for us, we wouldn't be able to participate at all. And it's funny, it's gotten to the point where you record so much of this stuff, I actually don't even really pay attention all that much when I'm there. It's like the DVR syndrome, Your favorite show's on, but you're eating dinner, but you're recording it, so you're like, whatever, I'll watch it.
I get myself the little TiVo things.
Yeah, so I come to things like this, and I'm having a conversation with someone. I'm like, Deirdre, I'll record it. I'll watch it when I get home.
But there's still the value of coming and having the face-to-face conversations that happen around these events.
Yeah, and that's the killer. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Lisa, is what you hear from people is how much what they call the hallway conference here.
Yes. It's
just conversations that happen in the hallway. Out front of the hotel, people coming and going, and you're always running into each other. And last night, actually, I had a fascinating conversation with a fellow from DreamWorks. And so I was learning all kinds of, behind-the-scenes things about different films that they've done. I've always been a big fan of Pixar, Bay Area company, and we have a data center actually just down the street from Pixar's facilities. And so going back and forth and learning some of the behind-the-scenes things and how they handle data center problems. And it's kind of funny, too, when you see completely different sides of the industry, maybe, and how their problems are very much the same, trying to find data center space, trying to get, power, these sort of basic sort of things, and we're all having the same sort of problems. So it's fun. Yeah, you just run into a lot of different people that you wouldn't normally, and it is a different kind of crowd than a lot of the conferences that I normally attend, because they're in the Bay Area, and Sun is awesome and has free passes and things for certain parts of the show. At least you can go to parts of it. Like Java 1 is a great example. It's a very accessible conference. Community 1 has been fantastic in allowing a lot of people who wouldn't be able to go to a really nice enterprise-grade, industry conference to go and meet the experts and participate and drink a lot of really good free beer. They were charging for alcohol at that party last night.
Really?
Sun takes care of its people and its customers. $11 for a glass of wine. $11 for an $18 bottle of Merlot. It's a sin.
Okay, so we've got the beer part down. What could we be doing better?
What could you be doing better?
At the level of nurturing community, getting people involved, evangelizing.
I think we're doing a great job. I think we could, obviously the more, right? I would love to have an army of you. We need to clone you, and the video is priceless. I think the video is probably the most appreciated of the stuff, right? For years, conference you can go to, you wait until the slides came up, right? But really what you want to hear is the speaker and hear what they have to say and listen to the questions that are asked and stuff. And the video makes you feel like you're there, from your own, the comfort of your own home. I love video. I'm trying to actually do more of it myself, because it just there's something that gets conveyed that you don't get in blog entries or written text. And then otherwise, I think we're actually doing a really good job. We're a very mature community, so maybe there are things that aren't perfect, but we almost don't really think about them, right? Because we've tried them and they maybe didn't work. The site was just reorged, and we're all working out some issues with the site. But we now moved over to a wiki for OpenSolaris.org, which provides a bunch of new benefits, and it's created a couple of issues here and there.
We're still pretty young compared to Linux.
Well, we're young, but we're a lot more organized. We're a lot more organized, right? Linux is inherently distributed, right? So there's the Red Hat community, there's the Debian community, there's the Gentoo community, there's the Ubuntu community. There's all these different communities that have different kind of focuses and different ways of doing things, right? And there's ways that Red Hat nurtures to their community, and SUSE, goes up to their community, and there's of course a lot of just community resources. The funny thing is that in the Solaris world, we've actually had community resources longer than Linux because we've been around longer, and some fantastic resources. And I think a lot of that was actually modeled in the early days. But then when Open Solaris came along, we had a kind of a unifying force. The community flocked to Sun, the Sun flocked to the community, and we've tried to work together to try and work together. And it's very unified, right? I feel like a lot of us are very much on the same page. Some of it's done outside of OpenSolaris.org or Sun websites, and others are done right there. But we all kind of work together, and so it does feel like a very cohesive, unified community, as opposed to Linux, where it's just a lot of guys kind of fending for themselves. So
that's one thing I'd love to see some of those big research firms do a study on, is because the Open Solaris community is fundamentally different in the way it was created. Mm-hmm. The fact that it does have this very heavy weight of a company behind it, which is both good and bad. But in any case, it's very different. It would be interesting to study.
Well, I think the reason it's worked is because what's really defined Sun has been its culture. Right? It's had great products. It's had a lot of various industry niches and things like that any company would have over the years. But it's had a very pervasive culture from the very beginning of the founding of the company all the way through to today. And that's been present in the community. Even long before Sun was embracing the community, it was there. And it's been a company that really supports its developers inside, and in a very unique way, right? If you go to HP or IBM or other big top tier enterprise companies, you have no idea who's working on any given technology, right? And there's no feeling that the company's really vested in it. But when you look at Sun, that Brian Cantrell is the D-Trace guy. And you know that as long as Brian Cantrell is at Sun, he will always ensure that there are standards, and that it's really a kind of a very passionate product. So that with Fishworks and Jeff Bonwick and Bill Moore with ZFS, and there are human beings behind the technology who are really passionate about it. And there are some people who say, well, I don't like trusting large corporations. But in the case of Solaris, right, you're not trusting Sun, you're trusting
Brian and Jeff and
Brian
Bill.
and Jeff and Bill and Sine, and these are people who fight for it, and that really does come through to the community, and it allows you to connect in a very human way with the product, and people are very passionate about it. So it's an engineering culture inside the company that has always permeated out to customers and to the community.
Which makes sense, because that's who our customers are.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's really, I think, set it apart. And it's also, that's one of the reasons people are passionate about Sun, positive or negatively. It's kind of like a family, right? Sometimes you love.
Sometimes we're a little dysfunctional, but yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's the funny thing though. People kind of love the company to death. I say, they complain a lot, but it's because they care.
Yeah.
And you don't see a lot of companies, at large in the world that people really connect to in a personal way with, and especially in technology. Sometimes you see it with car companies or something like that, right? But you don't see that in technology a lot.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, everybody's familiar with Apple technology, and everybody loves their iPhone and what have you, but could anyone name a single engineer at Apple?
No, well, that one's interesting because it all hinges on Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the big concerns, right? People trust that as long as Steve Jobs is at Apple, they will produce a certain quality of product. They will produce a top tier product. And it was interesting when he got sick. One of their first concerns was trying to take those VPs, executive VPs, and product managers and stuff who'd always been hidden away behind Steve Jobs and bring them to the forefront because they needed to establish that trust. Right, we saw that in the market, right? When Steve came back to do a Macworld keynote, and the market rallied because he's back.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they see him, and he looks frail, and the market drops, right? And that scares everyone when there's too much association between one man and the entire company. Sun's never had that, right? They're certainly, it's a company full of very big personalities.
Yeah. Got a whole
Very
stable
big
of
personalities.
rock stars.
Yeah, and I mean to say same, and the whole Java side of the company is the same way,
Yeah.
right? You gotta love Gosling, right? Dr. Gosling has an amazing personality, right? So, but we see that all throughout the company. John Fowler is fantastic, likes talking to customers, listens to customers. Jonathan was that way. Scott McNeely's always been that way. There are very few people in the company who don't really have a passion for the products and the customers, and that's something that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's a guarantee of quality.
Yeah.
Because these are people who take pride in what they're doing.
Well, looking forward, I think that's one of the things that we're going to maintain with Oracle is Oracle's a company with some big personalities too, right? It's like when you see Larry get up there and really rail against things and get passionate about things, you're like, we know that feeling.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? I've run out of questions. Do you have any more ideas?
Okay.
Anything else you want to say?
What's your favorite aspect of social media? Do you like the word social media?
Well, for me, it's funny because I have been communicating online for over 25 years, and social media is just a new term for stuff. I was supporting customers on CompuServe in 1993.
Ooh,
And,
CompuServe.
Yes, because I was working for a company that was doing CD recording software, and we had happened to we put out a book and we put a CompuServe address on there because that was what we had for email, and people contacted us. And so then I had been on CompuServe 10 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was back on CompuServe, and there were forums, and so CompuServe actually invited us to start our own forum for our product. And so I was just out there supporting customers, and that's really no different from, the forums that, whether it's your software forum or whatever that people have today, where customers are supposed to come help each other. And
So
it's just the tools are better.
It's just natural as breathing for you.
Yeah, and I've done it all along. I literally started in 1982. My father bought me a Commodore VIC-20.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, he wanted me to learn programming.
Oh, really?
Which I did not, absolutely failed to do, but he mainly wanted it because he was recovering from surgery and wanted to be able to play Space Invaders. But it had a modem, and so I figured, okay, this is a communications tool.
Yep.
And that's what I used it for. So I was on CompuServe doing CB chat, which is what they used to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And, back then the proportion of women online was less than 10%. So got lots of attention, that was interesting. And so for me it was just, that's what you do, you communicate.
Can I ask what your handle was?
It was my name. No, that was funny because I'm really good at testing because I find all the wrong ways to do things. Like I'm a perfect beta tester because I break everything instantly. And I think my mind just works differently than what people expect of end users. And so the first time I got onto the chat, somehow I ended up going through a back door, and instead of asking me what do you want your handle to be, it just said, what's your name? So I said Deirdre. And so I just never...
So the people in the room are like Dark Cat and
and
Grim Reaper and Deirdre.
Yeah, and A, it was female, B, well, somebody later told me that he thought that subconsciously people saw Deirdre and saw desire.
Oh.
Okay. But, so I never had a handle, I was always myself. And I never did the anonymous thing. And so that has been, in a way, my trademark for over 20 years, 25 years online, and it's always just been me.
And so, as things have progressed, I'm curious of all the different mediums we have now. Because we have a lot of mediums, right? We have audio, video, You could almost put screencasts in their own category. You've got text and blogging and white papers and the various layers of things, down to forums and chat. Of all the different mediums available to you, what do you find to be your favorite?
I use a bunch of different things, and it just depends on who I'm trying to reach, what I'm trying to reach them for. I still write actual text blogs. I don't write big long articles that I used to. I just haven't had time. I obviously do a lot of video. I use Twitter a lot just because it's there and it's easy. But they all have different purposes. It's different crowds. There are lots of situations in which it's still appropriate to write a white paper or a long blog post, and other situations in which 140 characters is plenty.
Well, do you think microblogging is really detracting from proper blogs? Do you find that you actually blog less now because there are some things that you don't need to write 500 words or something like that? You can now just kind of blast out a quick idea.
I think it probably has detracted from my blogging, but it's also this confluence of circumstances that when I was writing a lot of really long articles in my personal blog, it was when I had a lot of time.
Right.
I was commuting an hour and a half in the train each way every day, and my job was not taking up very much of my creative energy, and so I still had plenty of energy left over on those trips and on the weekends to actually sit down and think about an article. Nowadays, I'm just running full tilt all the time, and by the time I get home in the evening, I'll watch TV, which is something I almost never do. So I just don't have that kind of mental energy that I used to have for personal blogging. But I don't know. I mean, in a way, I'm writing more because I'm on Twitter all the time, and I use it almost as a kind of hidden diary.
Yeah, and
throwing out things that.
The funny thing about microblogging is it actually is more true to the term weblog than blogging has been, because blogging has become so formal that you actually get complaints, right? If you blog things that are too trivial, people, well, why are you doing that? They'll almost get offended. Especially my blog, which is almost entirely technical. Every so often I'll want to mix it up and write something non-technical, and I'll actually get people being like, hey, you're now, clogging up my RSS feed with things I don't care about.
Like, I came all the way over here to hear about your wife? Are you kidding?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm so sorry. How dare I write something that didn't suit you in my blog? But the thing is that's how far we've come through the blog sort of revolution. We've come to a point where it's now expected to have a certain level of professionality, a certain level of completeness.
That's a very good point.
People can't just write that, I like mint chip ice cream because it's green and has those little flaky things, and it's awesome.
But on Twitter you can say that.
On Twitter you can say that. Yeah, and so in Twitter you get kind of more of a stream of consciousness, and it's much more pure, and because of the character limitation, you sort of just have to kind of say what you want to say and be done.
But people use Twitter in different ways, though. So you get people who do nothing but point to articles and whatever their topic is, they're just going to point you to their articles and other people's articles, and they're very focused. And then people like me who are all over the map, I'm probably more so than most people. That's one thing people complain about. Oh, so and so has become really boring on Twitter. It's like, if it bores you, stop following it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, I think Gruber actually recently pointed out that if you think Twitter is boring, you're following the wrong people.
Exactly.
Stop blaming. Don't blame the concept.
Yeah, if you find Stephen Fry boring, don't follow him.
Yeah,
it's okay.
You
don't have to attack the poor guy.
Yeah, and that's true of life, right? When you're around a group of people, if the conversations are boring, you need to find a different group of people.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not happening.
It's harder to walk away and be graceful about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You just leave.
Yes, there's nothing better than the unlike button.
Yeah.
Right? So change the mind.
Yeah.
Do you feel like things like Facebook are going to start to diminish that a bit?
Facebook, the thing I deeply dislike about Facebook is I can't count it. I love running stats. I love knowing what is effective. I love Bitly because I can put a link on Twitter and I get 10 hits to that link within 10 seconds, and I know it hits to it. And I can see, exactly, like when that kernel conference,
right?
When I tweeted, hey, we're doing the thing now, and I was, the keynote I knew we were going to get traffic to, but then in the afternoon I was trying to pick it up again.
Right.
And I went back on Twitter and said, hey, we're talking about whatever it was, and 47 people immediately jumped on the stream. I can see results.
Right.
Facebook is a black box. I can't tell what's going on. I can found a group, I can see how many people belong to a group, but I have no way of knowing how many of them actually have visited the group, have read the messages. The only way I know I'm going to reach them is if I blast out a message to everybody, and that gets kind of obnoxious. And I can only do that if it's my group. But I get absolutely no stats on, who's, you'll see people with a list of 200 groups and fan pages and all this stuff.
Right.
You don't know what they're actually looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can only gauge my own behavior, which is, there's 1 or 2 groups I look at most.
Right.
So that's, until Facebook becomes more accountable, it's not that useful to me. We have Solaris and Open Solaris and various technology groups on Facebook, but they all kind of die off, and I think it's probably for this reason, that you don't have a sense of reaction. Unless you do build up one of those rare groups that actually gets a lot of traffic, but that's a lot of work. And we've got so many other forums.
I'll agree with that. I mean, feedback is critical. There's a lot of blogs that I've done. The funny thing is in my blog, if I write something technical, I spend a lot of time, check my facts, write it technical, I get 0 comments.
Because you've said everything there is to say.
Yeah, well, and people don't.
Or maybe you scared them.
Yeah, I don't know. People don't. I look at the statistics and they get hit, right? People are using them, but yeah, to a certain extent. What do I say? What do I add? This isn't a conversation.
Yeah.
This is a statement. Effectively, there's nothing for me to say. If I write a trivial post, 30 comments, because there's an inlet there, and sometimes that's frustrating, because what it ends up doing is diminishing your personal desire to work on it. When you wake up in the morning and think, what do I want to do? You tend to want to focus on the things that are rewarding, the things that actually benefit people, and you get comments on, and people tell you, that's what you should spend your time on. And all of a sudden, it's the things that are should have the most value have the least.
Well, there are techniques, because you can think consciously, okay, I've written this article and I've explained this whole thing, but then end it with a question.
Yeah,
hey, what's your experience with this? Or have you seen something different? Or do you have a different way to do this?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's forced, but it can work.
And I've started playing around with that, actually. I did spend some time actually writing a bunch of technical blog posts, but then doing things like that, almost experimentally, like if I ask this kind of question, that kind of question, how can I nudge? And I actually kind of almost found a point where I felt like I could actually basically predict comments and reaction based on how much leeway I left and stuff. So that's interesting.
Of course, you can always do I've said it all. There's nothing more to say.
There's nothing more to say. Please don't comment, because that would suggest that I was incomplete. So, you've used all the various forms of media and you've done them for years. So, where do you think where do you think we're headed to now? Do you think that there's some new technology that's going to come to extend things, or do you think that we're into one of those phases where it's just about better learning and honing our abilities to use the existing resources we have?
You're not the first person to ask me that, and I always say, if I knew, I'd be working for them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm hearing about Google Wave. I have no clue what it is, so we'll see what it is. I'm sure there's so many brilliant people over there. Who expected Twitter? When I first started looking at Twitter, I was twittering about my lunch, just the same as many people do. I eventually figured out that was boring. What happens that's interesting is, and Twitter has been the case study, that they gave us a very simple technology, but then people found ways to extend it. With the at replies and the hashtags, and those things went back into the API, because you've got millions and millions of people evolving this thing every second of the day.
Yeah.
So that's when it gets really interesting. We're finding the real power of aggregate intelligence.
Right.
So how could I, a single person, predict what's going to come out of something like that? There's no way I can.
Yeah.
We've got brilliant people giving us brilliant APIs and code bases to do things like, YouTube now, you can do comments, you can do translations, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the millions of users who are going to keep, one little increment at a time pushing that and seeing what you can do. And when you think about how, even BBS is so early on,
Mm-hmm.
people were doing all kinds of things that no one expected. So that's what's going to make it interesting. But it also makes it impossible to predict. And that's part of the reason I laugh with the social media experts. It's like, guys, you've got on the bandwagon the same time as everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just better at marketing what you know.
One of the things I think is probably most interesting about Twitter as it relates to social media is that they were a brilliant proof that the old first mover concept, first mover advantage still applies.
Yeah, because
There are
failed.
there's a lot of services that are better than Twitter in so many ways. But Twitter was there first. Twitter, ramped up, and that was enough lead that nobody can catch up.
Yeah. How are we doing on tape? We've been talking for a while. Oh, that's right. We don't have. I can't.
We don't have a tape.
No, we have a tape, but I've run out of the number. I don't. It'll warn you when you get to 5 minutes. But, for some reason, my counter is turned off, and I can't figure out how to turn it back on.
Oh.
I don't know.
I love that microphone.
But that's $175. Oh, it's cheap.
Well, my next purchase is actually going to be a Rode Podcaster microphone.
Well, depends what you're using it with, though.
I'm getting ready for screencasts, and I'm so curious what SunEd is going to do.
With what?
Well, if I start creating full, proper screencasts for Solaris training, there's going to be I'll potentially be competing against SunEd, right? I mean, I would like to think that I'm filling in the gap of people who would love to go to like Sun training but can't afford it, and this is all they've got. That's my audience, right? But
they can't stop you. Why would they want to?
no, I don't think they would. Well, I asked them last night, do you feel like you ever compete with community? And he said emphatically no.
Well, because in the end, community can't issue that certificate.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's what they will always have.
Well, the big customers tend to be organizations where it's some type of they want the indemnity, right? If somebody pushes the wrong button, they want to be able to blame it not on their employee, but on the guy who trained them.
Yeah. But, no, I personally, I would welcome any material you want to do, and I will be happy to help you create it and promote it. So it's all just. The tagline I've been using is, okay, we open sourced all the software, now we have to open source the knowledge about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I keep wanting to do. And I want to make it easy for people who have the knowledge to get it out there. So that's why I run around and film engineers. Are we done?
What else is there to say? It's all been said.
We have said it, so it's
We
done.
have said it. Exactly.
Okay.